Hi everyone, I'm Dina with Mills Family Gardening. We live in North Texas, Zone 8A, and in this video we'll be talking about what we can plant throughout the month of November by seed outside, indoors, and by transplant. Let's first talk about what we can plant outside by seed. And all these vegetables and herbs that I'm going to mention need to be preferably planted in early November because late November might be too late for the seeds to be able to germinate outside because temperatures are cooling down, the soil temperature is cooling down by a lot, and so some seeds might have trouble germinating in cold temperatures. So by seed outside in early November, we can plant radishes, garlic, turnips, spinach, onions by seed. You can also plant Swiss chard, kale, cilantro, parsley, dill, and lettuce. Now we have to keep in mind that temperatures in November from year to year vary. So if it gets really cold in November, then obviously all those seeds will not germinate. But after your seeds germinate in November, we have milder weather and your seeds do germinate, and the temperatures suddenly drop below 30 degrees Fahrenheit, it's better to protect all those seedlings, except for garlic, because seedlings are much more tender than grown plants that are mature and established. And so even a light freeze might kill or damage those seedlings. Garlic is very frost and even freeze hardy. It can withstand temperatures all the way down to 5 degrees Fahrenheit. I never cover my garlic and it always does well. If you're in doubt, then you can simply spread a thick layer of mulch about 4 to 6 inches in your garlic bed after you plant garlic, and it will be okay during the winter time. Now when it comes to onion seeds, I prefer to start my onion seeds indoors simply because onion seedlings are very thin, they are very hard to notice, and I might accidentally step on them, or they might get lost in the debris of mulch or other garden debris. So I like to start onion seeds indoors and wait until beginning of January to start hardening them off. And then I usually plant them at the end of January or beginning of February outdoors. Now that we're approaching winter, the sun is much lower and we don't get as many hours of sunlight per day. That is why it's very important to choose the sunniest location in your garden to plant all these fall vegetables, because if they don't get enough sunlight, your radishes might be very thin, or it will take them much longer to grow into large radishes, and your herbs might be very thin and spindly. Dill is not as cold hardy as cilantro and parsley, so you might need to cover dill once temperatures drop below 30 degrees Fahrenheit. But when it comes to parsley and cilantro, they're very cold hardy and I hardly ever cover them, and they do just fine. They grow well through the winter. Even through our harshest winters, they did okay. But if you're in doubt and you're afraid that your seedlings or plants might die, you can always cover your plants. Now let's talk about what flowers we can plant by seed outside directly in the ground. All Texas native perennials can be planted right now by seed, and a lot of them require some cold stratification. Cold stratification is a process when seeds stay through cold temperatures for a few weeks. Sometimes it's 2 weeks, sometimes it's 6 weeks, depending on plants and seeds, and that helps them to start germinating. Besides Texas native perennials, we can plant the following flowers, and those are bachelor buttons, delphiniums, foxglove, echinacea, eryngium, hollyhock, monarda, nigella, orlea, penstemon, rudbeckia, Queen Anne's lace, sweet peas, and ranunculus corms. Some of these flowers, like bachelor buttons, survive through the coldest temperatures here in North Texas, and they do just fine. All our bachelor buttons were planted several years ago. After that, I've never planted new bachelor button seeds, and they all have been coming up on their own. Bachelor buttons reseed very easily here in North Texas. Last spring, I did plant 2 colors of bachelor buttons that I didn't have in our garden yet, and those were white and pink, and I planted them right in this place. And after they were done blooming, what I did, I simply cut down the flowers after they were already dried out and simply placed them in this place. So you can still see them in that location. And I did that because I want the seed to sprout on their own, and they're very good at sprouting on their own if you just put them in the ground and leave them alone. When the temperature is right, those seeds will sprout. And some of the flowers that I mentioned, for example, delphiniums and foxglove, bulbs require cold stratification also. So if you place the seeds outside now, they will go through this time of cold temperatures and they will start sprouting when the temperatures are right. What I like to do with Rudbeckia to keep the reseeding process simple and easy, I simply take the dried out flower bud and place it where I want it to grow next year. So the seeds stay inside of the dried flower until the temperature is right and the soil moisture is right for them to start sprouting. And they do sprout while they're still inside of the dried flower. It's just amazing. Now let's talk about what we can transplant outside throughout the month of November. We can transplant outside all vegetables in the cabbage family, and those are broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. We can also transplant outside spinach, kale, lettuce, Swiss chard, collard greens. You can transplant outside herbs like cilantro, dill, and parsley if you started them indoors. Also, throughout the month of November, we can plant all the perennials outside. Try to plant the perennials that are heat and drought tolerant. Texas native perennials are the best, but there are a lot of non-native and non-invasive plants that are heat and drought tolerant. They can easily plant it throughout the month of November. I know a lot of people like plants like Greg's mistflower and Millie blue sage, but they can be very aggressive in the way they spread by seed or by shoots in the soil. So if you plan to grow Greg's mistflower or Millie blue sage, be prepared to either pull out a lot of seedlings in the spring or give them a lot of space in the garden where you're not going to be afraid that they will take over your garden. I recommend you stay away from a plant called trumpet vine. I know a lot of people like to plant it because it grows vigorously and fast, but it's very invasive, and once it establishes, it's really hard to get rid of it. It spreads by seed and also by runners in the ground. Instead, I would recommend you plant cross vine, which is native in North America, and it's way more manageable than trumpet vine. All the vegetables and flowers that we can plant outside by seed that I had mentioned earlier can be started indoors by seed. By seed indoors, we need to plant such flowers as poppies, yarrow, straw flowers, feverfew, snapdragons, dianthus, status, and stock. Now let's talk about other garden jobs that we need to do in November. In November, we need to buy tulip bulbs, preferably in the beginning of November, because if you buy non-pre-chilled tulip bulbs, you'll have to pre-chill them for about 6 to 10 weeks. 8 to 10 weeks is better, but 6 weeks is a minimum time range. How do we pre-chill tulip bulbs? We place them in a brown paper bag and place them in a refrigerator for about 6 to 10 weeks. Now, in our refrigerator, we have a lot of fruits and vegetables that emit this gas that really damages tulip bulbs. So ideally, you would want to keep those tulip bulbs in a separate refrigerator or somehow away from the rest of your fruits and vegetables. Do not store your tulip bulbs in plastic bags because that way they will rot. We are tight on our refrigerator space, so we don't have any room to store additional tulip bulbs in our refrigerator. For that reason, I prefer to buy pre-chilled tulip bulbs. If your tulip bulbs are not pre-chilled, then they will grow very small flowers and the plants themselves will be very short. Throughout the month of November, it's a great time to move and divide and transplant your perennials, and also keep fertilizing and mulching your garden to keep the weeds down. I know a lot of gardeners like to keep their gardens neat and clean, but I would recommend you hold off on garden cleanup in the fall because a lot of insects and beneficial pollinators nest in those dead and dry plants. So with a lot of plants, it's better to wait with garden cleanup until late winter or early spring. But we do need to remove all the diseased plants from the garden, including their roots, so the disease does not spread to the next generation of plants. Also, with all of your plants that you remove from your garden, you can start a compost pile. It can be a simple pile in a corner of your garden. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. You don't need to build any bins, or you can simply use a trash barrel where you punch a lot of holes all over on the sides and on the bottom of the bin, and that should be a good place for your compost. I like to bury our kitchen scraps directly into the ground, either in ground beds or in raised beds. For example, that raised bed in the back, that's where our sweet potatoes are growing, and in November I'm going to harvest our sweet potatoes, so that raised bed will be empty throughout the month of November and most of the winter. And I like to use that raised bed as my composting raised bed where I bury our kitchen scraps directly into the ground. And that brings us to the next garden job. In November, we need to harvest our sweet potatoes, turmeric, and ginger. That's what we're planning on doing, and we're working on a video. In fact, 2 videos on how to grow ginger and turmeric from planting to harvest, so stay tuned and subscribe to our channel. And also a few years ago, we made a full video on how to grow sweet potatoes from growing slips to harvesting, so check out that video also. And that's what we plant and do in November, so watch temperatures in November and stay vigilant in your garden. Thank you for watching this video and have a great day.